Hello, everybody, and we've already got some questions in already, but welcome to the Premier Injuries live stream. We are doing it in the deadline, as usual, ahead of game week 26. But as always, before we start, I always ask how you're doing, Ben. It's a bit of a frantic one today because it's 18 press conferences, is that right?
It's been a busy one, mate. I'll show me age here, and to misquote the Bangles, it's just another manic Friday. Absolute. It's bedlam. It's bedlam. I've got two press conferences on the go just being released, so that's why you see my eyes darting left and right. But I think for the most part, we're pretty much on the money, I hope. Obviously, the caveat is this article will need a slight updating and tweaking because the news is just coming in and we simply physically haven't got enough time to be able to go through that.
I thought you might have been watching a tennis match or something, just, casually whilst we're live streaming.
Oh, mate. If only I had the time.
All right, let's get into the questions. Actually, before we get into the questions and any discussion, just to remind people, obviously, as Ben said, it's an ever-changing situation with injuries, and even when we go into the matches at the weekend, there could be breaking injury news. And the best place for that, you head over to the Premier Injuries website, premierinjuries.com. You can find the injury table. A lot of people love to kind of look at the fact that we've got all the teams alphabetically. And if you have a click down, you can see the reasons why, potential return. And then if you've got more questions, you can tweet me or Ben, and we will do our best to answer. But as we said, it is a pretty manic Friday. But we're going to go over to the predicted teams, and starting with Bournemouth. Ben, what is the latest for the Cherries?
Yeah, so Lewis Cook comes back into contention, but he's missed around about 6 or 7 weeks with that knee injury that forced him out on the sideline. So we're not expecting too many changes. We did see a tweak from Gary O'Neill against the champions last weekend. Manchester City went with a back five. That was because Marcus Tavernier pulled up with a hamstring problem. He still isn't fit, although he could return in game week 27. That opened the door for Chris Mepham to come into that five. And obviously, it's a tough trip going to the league leaders in great form, as you well know. So you might stick with that back five. I didn't think the Cherries were too bad. A couple of slight mistakes, maybe a little bit naivety from Zamora letting Phil Foden run off him twice. But look, they give the champions a good game. So it's a positive performance. There's a lot to take from that. Like I say, he won't be too disheartened, so I expect a similar type of lineup and setup from Gary O'Neill.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting game. It is at the Emirates, and obviously I'll be supporting the Gunners. There's a lot to like about this game, though, and I'm just putting in the chat for everybody a captaincy poll just to see, because I'll be doing a captaincy video a little bit later today that you can check out. And once again, it might be controversial like my one last week with Salah. And just as well, we've got FPL Popo. He said, waiting patiently. Hello, all the way from Eswatini. I don't even know which country that is, Ben. Eswatini?
Pass.
Okay.
I took history, not geography.
Okay, we'll look that up, and then I'll say hi to all the people in Eswatini. Wesley says, hi, lads. Cedric says, greetings and salutation. And we've got a mention of Ivan Toney, who we will cover in just a little bit. But Arsenal, they're the ones that we are going to see take on the Cherries. I'm very excited for this game. My captaincy pick is Bukayo Saka, but is there any reason why Arsenal or Arsenal asset owning people should be a bit worried? Is there any injury news?
On the whole, pretty good, generally speaking. Mikel Arteta, as always, has been very coy on a potential return for Gabriel Jesus. We're hopeful, and I'm optimistic that might happen before the international break, or certainly in and around the matchday squad. Eddie Nketiah has found himself, unfortunately for me, who captained him in a double game week, found himself on the bench twice. That's because he's been carrying an ongoing niggling issue, but that's opened the door for Leandro Trossard to line up alongside Gabriel Martinelli. He seems to have found his mojo again, so I cannot really see even if Eddie Nketiah is 100% fit and he faces a late test, I don't see him disrupting that front three. In midfield, Jorginho was replaced at the break against Everton because of illness. Now, Mikel Arteta actually referenced the fact that when Thomas Partey came on, you know, Everton really stepped up their game and he was really impressed, particularly with that second half performance. Jorginho is fit, so he's over that minor ailment, that illness. I just think this is a good opportunity for Thomas Partey to get some minutes in his legs and maybe plays it around about that 60 to 65 minutes, and then Jorginho comes on for the latter half. And also you may see a change there at right back, and that's Tomiyasu. Again, I think he come in for that game against Manchester City, give that goal away. It was a great finish by Kevin De Bruyne. So maybe just in terms of a fitness perspective and maybe a confidence issue, and also to rest Ben White, of course, is at the 3-game week. That's why I have Tomiyasu starting at right back.
Now, you've said all that with Tomiyasu. Why not Tierney in the side?
Yeah, I see Tierney more as a bench player who comes on and in the latter half. I think we're only talking about 400 or so minutes this season for Kieran Tierney. And I was surprised to learn that he has 100% availability for Arsenal this season. He's a player that has been linked with a potential move away. Even Newcastle are one of the clubs that are said to be linked. And of course, those questions remain with regards to his injury history. Like I say, he's been available 100% of this season, but he still hasn't been getting a lot of game time. And I just think, the form that Zinchenko's in, that's why he keeps his place, and Tierney, again, like I say, may have to settle for minutes from the bench.
I'd be loath to lose him in the summer. But also, I think, interestingly, maybe over the coming weeks, I'm not going to disagree with you here, Ben, but maybe we might see a tinkering with Tierney kind of playing that inverted wing-back role, because when he did come on in that game, just to see it out, obviously it was the dying ebbs of the match, but he was playing in that more inverted role. He kind of slotted in a defensive mid role during the match, and so that was good to see that maybe he's being crafted into that role that Arteta demands from the wing-backs. We shall see. And like I said, I've put a captaincy poll for people in there. Please do vote, and we'll see who your captain is for game week 26. Slavcho has asked, please share some information on your chip strategy, and if you think Spurs will finish the season strong, especially if they get eliminated by AC Milan. A few questions there. I guess we'll cover chip strategy, and we'll get to the Spurs question a little bit later when we talk about Spurs. And Ben, we've got an answer to where Eswatini is, Swaziland, or formerly known as Swaziland. Slavcho's question, chip strategy. Are you really thinking that far ahead, Ben, in terms of when to play chips, etc., etc.?
Do you know what? I always default to the same response. It's chip strategy for me. It's very much down to the individual. It's down to your unique needs of your team, and I wouldn't feel pressured or needed to try and implement a chip just because others around you seem to be doing so. You always look to maximize your returns with your chips. So if you're looking around those double game weeks, then that's great. But of course, if you're heading, if you've got injuries, suspensions, you're struggling to maybe get 11 players out on the pitch, or you don't want to necessarily, you want to change things up, freshen your team, but you don't want to take those hits, then do it. But like I say, I don't have anything hard and fast set with regards to when that will happen. Like I say, it comes down to assessing my team more on a week-to-week basis. And if things aren't going right and I want to change them up, then I will do so. I'm not one for following the crowd in that regard.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting this week. Early at the start of the week, I played my wild card, and at the time the rhetoric was people shouldn't be playing it. I don't really engage with a lot of content creators apart from Gianni. I always blow the horn for him. He's so good. But even people like him were saying that they weren't, and now we've come to the end of the week and a lot of people, I think, have switched. I don't know the reasons why. Again, I don't stay too much up to date with people, but like you said, just to reiterate your point, just play your way. Don't feel pressured because other people, but also your team has unique needs. You might have somebody that's injured. You might have somebody, for example, I played my wild card because I loaded up on a few Liverpool assets for the double game week last week, just to kind of make the most of it, treble up on Arsenal assets, and now I'm reviewing the situation and looking at the double game weeks, whatever. I think I'll play the free hit in 28, but apart from that, I'm seeing when best to play my treble captaincy. I still have that, and also I forget what the other one is, bench boost. So it's all situational. I might feel like doing it next week, the treble captaincy. We shall see. But let's continue with the team news. Ben, Aston Villa, what is the latest on them? And you had some interesting comments about Watkins this week in your 888 piece, didn't you?
I did. Team news first. There's a lot of people asking with regards to Diego Carlos. Of course, he's working his way back from a ruptured Achilles. He's in and around that squad in terms of training, taking part in some sessions, easing out of others. That's just good management. They always maintain that any game time before the end of the season, is going to be a bonus. I think realistically, we could be looking after the international break with that. But like I say, making very good steps. Leandro Dendoncker, he has missed out, but that's more of a personal reason in training today, although he hasn't really threatened for a start in and around there. Elsewhere within the team, not really expecting too much change other than Philip. We're seeing Ramsey come in for Philip Coutinho. That hamstring problem will keep him out for around about a month. And yeah, just to touch on your point with regards to Ollie Watkins, look, he's a player who seems to be attracting a lot of attention from FPL managers, and I suppose quite rightly so in terms of his recent returns. But I think you need to scratch beneath the surface a little bit. It's a little bit of a fool's gold. If you were on Ollie Watkins nice and early, then fair play to you. You've done very well there. But I don't see this little run of his being sustainable, in those future game weeks. I just, maybe put a little bit down to luck and some great finishing, but he's far exceeding his XG. And like I say, over a sustained period, it's going to be very, very difficult to maintain those levels. And I just think that maybe that ship has sailed a little bit with Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, he's not one that usually overperforms. He's a great footballer, but he's not like a consistent high quality finisher. And in the next few game weeks, in terms of the fixture difficulty rating, Aston Villa I think are in the top 4. But then I break it down. They're playing West Ham, who are pretty sturdy at the back. They're playing Chelsea. They're playing Newcastle. So 3 difficult fixtures in there as well. And they're playing some teams in there who've got a lot to play for as well. The likes of Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest as well. They have shown on their day that they can cause difficulties to the big boys like Manchester City. So it's not as clean cut as well, and the data perspective as you said. Now Brentford, I think a lot of people are very interested in this. We put Ivan Toney in the kind of promo picture because again there kind of is an update, but there kind of isn't an update. It's basically we're where we were. And I guess do you default back to the fact that until we know more, keep him in your team?
Yeah, of course, internally at the club, this is nothing new. These discussions is legal representatives and, Thomas Frank will be well aware of the situation with regards to Ivan Toney. The fact of the matter is he will serve in a ban at some point, and that's believed to be, a portion of that ban will be served while the season is still in play. But he still has to go to a disciplinary hearing. Ivan Toney isn't happy with the situation with regards to leaks, how he sees it, discussions with the FA, and he's admitted some charges and he's disputing others. Those ongoing conversations are supposed to be confidential. So he's asked his legal representatives to push that with the FA and say, why are these being coming out in the mainstream media? So that's maybe a ploy to try and deflect or delay that ban. But like I said, it's been touted that it could be in and around that sort of 6-month period. But for the here and now, Toney has probably defied or left all of those pressures, away from the pitch, and he's carried on delivering. And as as Brentford have done for the most part since the restart, certainly. So I still think Ivan Toney is a great option. And like I say, he's at a price point where, you don't have to make too many allowances elsewhere to bring him in. And ultimately, when that ban does come along, then, you ship him out.
And the other question, I guess, with the situation is, Brentford have doubles in the next few game weeks. They've got a lot of good games and a lot of options there as well. Is there like any major injury news that's going to upset the team for those doubles ahead?
Yeah, as it stands, the Bees pretty much have a healthy squad, or no real injury concerns with regards to some of their main, the main nucleus of their players. So, really good on that front. Pontus Jansson's one of the latest returners from a hamstring. Yeah, he doesn't have that match fitness, but could he be called upon if needed? Absolutely.
Right, let's turn to Brighton, and I think there's quite a lot of interest in their assets. There's quite a lot of discussion of who to bring in. Do you bring in Matoma or March? But also there's quite a lot of interest in Stupinian, Ivor, as we like to call him here. He is flagged on the Fantasy Premier League site. However, is there latest update from De Zerbi on him, and I guess any others in the team?
Yeah, if you missed it, game week 25 came off with a muscle-related issue that was hamstring, a little bit of tightness. That was more of a precautionary measure. Of course, there was no mention for the FA Cup fifth-round tie midweek. I think they won at Stoke, so he was admitted from the squad. Maybe that caused concern throughout the community, but suffice to say that he is fit and available and in contention. So no issues there. Also, Solly March missed out with a minor injury midweek. He's back and in contention. Danny Welbeck, I have him starting this weekend. Of course, Ivan, you've got me going at it now. Evan Ferguson has started the last two. I just think maybe a third game in a week for the young striker who Roberto De Zerbo said that he wants to protect and manage. I just think it's maybe a game too far, and that's why we have Danny Welbeck leading the Seagulls attack.
I think we just refer to everybody as Ivan now, Ivan Matoma, Ivan March. I guess maybe quickly, Ben, if you were to choose between March and Matoma, that's the kind of big question this game week, especially for wildcarders. Do you have a preference over one or the other?
I did dabble with Fantasy 5 for a few weeks, and whichever one I went for, the opposite one seemed to bang, so I couldn't get it right. I'm going to default to McAllister.
So that means the two of them are going to bang now, so you've helped us all out.
Yeah. I just think, the absence of Adam Lallana sees McAllister maybe push that little bit higher up the pitch. We have seen previously sitting in that double sort of six pivot. But I do like McAllister. He's got some good underlying stats where maybe he's just waiting for him to hit that pre-World Cup form again, but I'm sure that's not far away.
Yeah, as he gets reintegrated into the squad. Up next is Chelsea, and from the Premier Injuries website, the latest news is another injury to Reece James. Is that correct, Ben?
Yeah, he's struggling with a hamstring problem. That's a little bit of a tightness. So it's not a full-on strain or a pull that's going to rule him out of the game 100%. Again, this was late news, and it's, given his history, this could be one that I look to change up. Of course, Cesar Azpilicueta would be the player that typically that you would bring in at right back, but we know he's still under concussion protocols following that hospital admission, what would be almost 2 weeks ago now. So it will take a little bit of jiggling, probably a change in formation if we decide to remove Reece James. Maybe Chabaloa is an option, and possibly in a 3-5-2. Like I say, this Chelsea lineup are becoming very difficult to predict. We've covered this in the past with Graham Potter and the number of changes that he's actually averaging. I think it was 6 last time out. And I wouldn't be surprised to see another handful of players, coming in and out this weekend.
And with Chelsea, that there's I don't understand. There's some fantasy interest, because they're playing Leeds, people are investing in their defence. Kepa, I'd keep in there just because he's a pretty good cheap goalkeeper. But the rest of the team, there's so much rotation risk, there's so much worry, and injuries to key personnel as well. It's not a great situation there at the club. But let's turn our attention to Crystal Palace and a big boost we got there. Zaha's back.
Yeah, and I've actually threw him straight back in. I wouldn't ordinarily do that, particularly Patrick Vieira. He's really good at managing his players. Wilfried Zaha returned to training ahead of game week 25, but failed to make the matchday squad. And that was just a management issue. That's a precautionary measure. We've seen that he went off against Newcastle with a hamstring-related problem. He's took part in every session this week, so we know, he's ready to go. And given the Eagles' lack of goals, I think they've only suffered one defeat in 6, but maybe 5 of those have all been draws. So they need to get wins on the board before, they could get drawn into that relegation battle quite easily. So I think, let's get a couple of wins on the board, need some goals. Wilfried Zaha's the man.
Wilfried Zaha is the man. And just interesting that one of the Arsenal players, Lokonga, is in the side. We shall see what happens with Crystal Palace because, a little bit earlier in the season, there was a lot of positives and they seem to be doing all right. And now they're just kind of in a bit of a dullard phase. They're not scoring goals. They kind of are, keeping clean sheets every so often. But even then, they've just lost that little bit of zeal under Patrick Vieira. Do you think that's anything to do with injury reasons? We've seen Zaha out, or is it just the quality of the players in the squad?
Yeah, it's difficult. Generally speaking, their injury record's been fairly good. They have lost a couple of key players at points. Joachim Anderson was a calf problem. Guy who's missed out. I think Tyreek Mitchell's had a little bit of a niggling problem in the past. Of course, Zaha. Goal seems to be their biggest issue. Vieira doesn't quite know who. He's got Edward looked to have that position nailed down for a bit. Now it's been Mateta. Like I say, I think that's why I'm, leaning on bringing Wilfried Zaha back into that team just because of that lack of goals. Address that, and I think Palace are easily a mid-table team.
Now, a team that seems to be allergic to goals is Everton. They are bottom of the goal scoring charts for this season. But you've kind of mixed it up a little bit. Demarai Gray up top because of that. You think that could be an answer to the question of how did they get more goals. But is there any other team news that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, so Sean Dyche said, that he will monitor the fitness of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Of course, he's been sidelined with that hamstring issue. The wider circle is it's not the here and now. It's about bringing him back and keeping him back for the remainder of the season. So that's the conundrum that Sean Dyche is in. So for that reason, even if he does or he is past fit, I don't see him starting. Demarai Gray is actually still the leading goal scorer for Everton, despite his lack of minutes in recent times, but that's only 3 goals. Ellis Sims and Neil Maupay, haven't really, don't merit a place in that front line. Now, Sean Dyche could realistically change a few up here after that performance at Arsenal midweek, or he might just write that one off and say, well, look, we're playing against a really top team who are flying, in pole position in the Premier League, and we dust ourselves down. And I go back, to those players that, that we beat at Goodison against that Arsenal team. So that's why I haven't tinkered too much. Connor Cody comes back into the team. He was rested as a precaution midweek, given the fact that it's their 3rd game. Are they having 3 games?
Just following on from your comments about the Brighton players, we've got Magic69 saying, good to hear your comments about McAllister, Ben, because he doesn't have him. So hopefully, again, with the theory that when you have them in, they don't do well. We've got a question from Wesley saying, what is the latest on Dominic Calvert-Lewin?
Yeah, the latest is he's being monitored. Like I say, he's there or thereabouts. but the decision will be with regards to, do we risk him and potentially the striker may suffer the latest in a long line of setbacks, or do we just hold him back that little bit longer, get him some more time on the training pitches, and then hopefully once he does return, he stays fit and he can stay out the remainder of the campaign.
GV has said that DCL will be out till the international break. I mean, is there a timeline on it, or is it kind of see how it goes in terms of measuring how he does in training and things like that?
Yeah, look, he isn't too far away now. I would say there's maybe an outside chance of possibly making the bench in game week 26, but I would certainly expect him, at this current trajectory without any setbacks, to be involved before the international break.
Fulham up next. Ben, as always, what is the latest for the Cottagers?
At least one enforced change. That's Palina. He picked up his 10th caution of the campaign against Wolves last Friday. So that's an automatic 2-game ban. That probably opens the door for Sasa Lukic, the January signing. He was, of course, involved in the FA Cup midweek, and Fulham progressed. The biggest conundrum that I have at the minute for Fulham is, does Mana Solomon start? He's got 4 goals in successive games, 3 of those from the bench, scored another screamer midweek against Leeds. But he's vying for that spot with Willian. Unless you maybe put Willian on the other flank and maybe drop the Kova Reed. I just don't know. So that's where I'm at with this Fulham team. Mitrovic has been cleared from his recent hamstring problem. So, of course, he comes back in, and that's pretty much it. Like I say, that's Solomon. I find it really difficult to leave him out of the team given his performances. And there will be a point where Marco Silva has to say, look, you're coming in, but it's who drops out.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, but almost a good conundrum for him, but not for us as FPL managers, because we got second guessed what Marco Silva does. Leeds United up next, as you said. They played Fulham midweek. Did they pick up any injuries? Is there any worries from that match?
I suppose the short answer would be we don't know, Jason.
Yes.
When asked for an update, Javier Gracia said, I don't want to talk about injuries. I don't like giving you any information. And that was that. So as an FPL manager, we were left scratching our heads a little bit. This is what we know. Max Vuba, he suffered a partial dislocation back in game week 24, returned in game week 25, but was omitted from the squad midweek for the FA Cup. So that may have been a precautionary measure or a setback. We don't quite know. Liam Cooper returned in game week 24, but was omitted from the squad in game week 25 and also midweek. He's been struggling with a muscle problem. Luis Sinisterra was a player that we were expecting to be there or thereabouts after recovering from a hamstring problem. Archie Gray returned midweek. Sonny Perkins has been playing for the under-21s. Pascal Struijk was training, but on the eve of game week 25 was placed back in concussion protocols after reporting what they say is a fogginess or a dizziness on the training pitches. So we don't know if he is going to be available. He certainly wasn't involved in the FA Cup. Elsewhere, the long-term absentees, they effectively remain the same as far as we know.
As far as we know. I mean, have you ever had this before with a manager just straight up refusing injury news?
There's managers who sort of skate around the information. There are managers who straight up just lie. And then, at the opposite end of the scale, if you cast your mind back to Marcelo Bielsa, where he actually give us the starting 11 on at least 2 occasions in his tenure at Leeds. So, you go from that to this. I probably seem to recall Gracia when he was at Watford, playing a similar sort of game, keeping his cards very close to his chest. Thankfully, not many Leeds assets are really, worthy of much sort of consideration, given their current form. So it's not affecting the community too much.
I mean, imagine if you took that tactic of just not saying anything.
The live stream would be short and sweet.
It would be. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Ben, any injury news? Don't want to say. That's it.
Yeah, don't want to give you any information.
Leicester up next. I think Brendan Rodgers has probably said a little bit more than Javi Gracia. What has he told us this week?
Yeah, James Maddison missed out last weekend, but that wasn't related to his ongoing knee management issue. This was due to illness, and he was rested for the FA Cup. Maybe in hindsight, it was a decision that Brendan Rodgers probably regrets. The Foxes need to bounce back from that disappointing home loss to Blackburn. So I'm pretty much sticking with that start 11. But of course, James Maddison is pivotal to this team. With him, they take and they pay, and he creates opportunities. Without him, they just don't have that creative spark.
Yeah, it's kind of totally different teams almost when he's in, when he's out. I did want to ask, actually, just out of my own interest, Wilfred Ndidi, he's not played much for the Foxes this season. Was that due to injury reasons, or was that tactical? I mean, what did Brendan Rodgers say on that? Because, a couple of years ago, Ndidi was as good as N'Golo Kante. He was that elite as a defensive mid.
Yes, I think there have been one or two sort of niggles, a couple of hamstring problems along the way at key times as well. So when he did have opportunities, like I say, he was in the treatment room, and there's a lot of competition for those positions. We've seen Samori playing deep. We've seen Dewsbury Hall, as we have there. Marty can drop into there. We've also seen Tielemans, even Maddison on occasions. So there's lots of competition, and like I say, it's just he's been a little bit unfortunate, but hopefully he can take his chance if he gets it this weekend. And Leicester, this is a big game. Ideally, they get another 3 points on the board.
Yeah. So moving to Liverpool, big game with their rivals Manchester United in the derby. It's quite interesting because looking at the captaincy poll on the video here, nobody 0% has gone for Rashford. It's interesting because obviously we'll get onto the Manchester United team news, but I fancy Manchester United to do Liverpool. In the recent game weeks, there's been quite a few clean sheets, but then who have they played? You look at the underlying data, they haven't improved that much defensively. I don't see them keeping out Manchester United. I don't see them stopping Rashford. And so I would put Rashford higher up in terms of maybe captaincy choice. Definitely has to be in your team. But what is the latest injury news with Liverpool? Is there going to be anybody coming to the side to help stop the almost unstoppable Rashford?
Generally pretty good for Liverpool. Those long-term absentees remain the same, but there's no fresh injury concerns. 5 clean sheets in 6 it is. So, there's a positive to be taken from that. Ibrahima Konate returned midweek. He has been suffering from a hamstring problem. He gets a nod over Joel Matip. And I do keep Konate in the team. Had that maybe his game been on a Saturday, and maybe would have questioned his involvement, but certainly, with that additional recovery time, I think he starts. One player dropping out, Diego Jota. I don't think he's quite ready for 3 games in a week. That's why we have Cody Gakpo back in that attack with Núñez and Mo Salah.
Yes. Do you still have Gakpo in your team?
No, I had Núñez.
Oh, you had Núñez, sorry.
I had Núñez, and Núñez got ditched.
He got very much thrown out. But yeah, we've got some comments on Liverpool. So let me just have a look here. GV says Liverpool frontline firing on all cylinders, something to hope for. In terms of probably the personnel, I guess they are, but I just still have a reluctance over them. I think it's this midfield. I think they need personnel, and at the moment I don't think we're going to see many great performances from them just because they don't have the players. It's almost a similar problem to Manchester City. Obviously Man City is a bit stylistic because they're playing differently because of Haaland, but they're going to need players to be able to make up for the deficiencies in their squad as well. this brings us on to Manchester City. What is the latest for the citizens?
Generally, a clean bill of health. The couple of question marks that we had, John Stones, hamstring, and now Merrick Laporte, illness. Both of those players are training fully with the squad. So it'll be a case of sharpness. Neither will be ready for a start, I suspect. Never any guarantees with Pep Guardiola. We've seen the return of Kevin De Bruyne. Midweek, he was one that had been struggling with illness, and he scored. So we have him back in that starting 11. Special mention to Phil Foden. He seems to be recapturing some of that form, but we all know he's capable of. He's came out and he said that ongoing aggravating foot problem that he's had is 100% clear now. He feels great. He feels confident. Pep really sort of eulogized about his recent performances, about his high energy, his intensity, his dynamicity. And so, look, I have him in there. He's a player that I may move centrally and have Mahrez out on that right-hand side, possibly. And also you've got Diaz, who may come into that back line. So, like I say, it's never 100% locked in with Manchester City. And I may be taking another look at their team later on today.
I mean, the question that we always get is, how certain are you that Foden will play?
Look, on form, on purely form and the way he's been delivering, 100% he deserves to be in that starting 11. I really do think he transforms that City team, and that lull, that those sort of indifferent performances have been coming about when he isn't at his best and he isn't in the team. So I think he really elevates him. Despite his age, I think it's 200 games now he's had for Manchester City, and he's still, just a slip of a young lad.
So young. Manchester United up next, and as I said there, I think they're going to do bits against Liverpool. I don't want them to, as an Arsenal fan, but I suspect that the Red Devils are going to take them apart. And it's just interesting to me that there's not as much excitement around them this game week. I don't think the captaincy of Rashford is as good as Saka, but I think it comes close. I'd say Rashford probably is more appealing than Haaland this game week because he's playing you guys in terms of Newcastle. So I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
It's a big call. It's a Northwest derby, the rivalry between the two, and sometimes the form book just gets thrown out the window. And look, I do agree, and purely when you're just looking at the black and white, the numbers, the statistics, everything will point to United going out there and getting a great result. But I don't know, in the heat of the battle, players will be pumped up for this one. Fabinho, this renaissance period of his career, he's coming back into form, and Jurgen Klopp has mentioned that he thinks he's nearing somewhere towards his best. I think that as well as the tightening of that defense has certainly helped with those clean sheets. Look, it's a big call. Maybe I own Marcus Rashford. I could certainly, and I own Trent, as it happens. But look, I would quite happily take a couple of goals from Rashford at the weekend. But Saka against Bournemouth, given the form that the Gunners are in, I think I would lean towards that.
Yeah. Luke Shaw yellow flagged. GV has asked, is there concerns over him playing?
There has been. He picked up a knock in the Carabao Cup final. The problem is Manchester United played on Wednesday night, and then Erik ten Hag had a press conference on Thursday. So not only those players had been assessed from that Wednesday night, but also we have like a good few days before the actual game. So what that means, you can never be certain and you can't give any guarantees. So Erik ten Hag was optimistic, fairly hopeful that Luke Shaw would recover. And hence, like I say, that's why we have him starting. It was only a minor knock. The other main talking point, I think, is maybe on the opposite flank with Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I have him over Didier Deulofeu at the minute. That's again, he came off in the Carabao Cup final after picking up that yellow card. Wan-Bissaka, arguably, one of the better players in that second half performance against Newcastle, and similar midweek, came on again for Delors. So I think he probably deserves his place in that starting 11.
Right, let's have a look who is up next. It is Newcastle. So I'm guessing Chris's question, Chris Jane, he said, interested to see if Gordon gets a run out given the comments earlier today. So I'm thinking this is Newcastle's Gordon. Will
Anthony Gordon.
Yeah, will he get a run out today? And then I guess the other Newcastle news.
Oh, I was waiting for something else there. It just went dead. I thought my mic had cut out there for a second. Yeah, look, I really struggle with Newcastle. I know predominantly we've set up in a 4-3-3 this season. And up until this morning, with question marks originally over the fitness of Bruno Guimaraes, I even went with a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2, as it were. And then once he was past fit, I defaulted back to that 4-3-3. But I really would like to see Eddie Howe change things up a little bit, as Newcastle are in a little bit of a malaise in terms of their Premier League form. Certainly since the win at Leicester on Boxing Day, we haven't really, been pulling up any trees. Maybe it was a distraction of that Carabao Cup. It remains to be seen. It's a tough game against City. Potential options. I'm dying to see Anthony Gordon. Eddie Howe said that he's been working hard behind the scenes to improve his fitness. Does he drop Alan Saint-Maximin? He was great against Manchester City, earlier in the season in that 3-3 draw. He's also a man for the cameras. So, he's a player who does divide opinion. But when the cameras are on him on the big time occasions, he loves the limelight. So that's why I did go for Saint-Maximin. Elsewhere in the team, potentially, you have Matty Target at left back, maybe. Fabian Shaw hasn't been seen in the training pictures this week. We always urge a degree of caution with that, but he did take a fairly heavy facial knock in that Carabao Cup final. And if that was to hamper in any way, we could see Dan Burn move centrally, and like I say, Matty Target in at left back. But I suspect there are going to be one or two surprises in this lineup. So maybe just keep your eyes and ears peeled on posting anything or team updates here, because that could be tweaked before, well ahead of the FPL deadline.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one, because I think Eddie Howe, the 3-3 draw, like he said a little bit early in the season, shows that Eddie Howe knows how to play against Pep Guardiola. And I don't think this is going to be an easy one, not at all. And if anything, just from my number crunching, Newcastle's defence has actually improved even more since the World Cup restart. You've kept more clean sheets, less goals conceded per 90. This is going to be very tough for a City team that hasn't been in amazing form either. We're going to have a look at the questions here. Cedric says, Garnacho versus TAA will be some battle. FPL Pomp Kino has said, hi everybody from the country that almost surrounds Eswanti. And then GV's asked, which country is yours? So we're getting another country discussion again. It was amazing to see. Nottingham Forest, though, again, a team I don't think there's much interest in, but any quick updates there?
Yeah, nothing really. Nico Williams is expected to keep his spot for another week with Serge Aura. A little bit of disparity over timelines between the player and Steve Cooper. Player says maybe he could be back in around about a week. Steve Cooper probably says that he won't be back till after the international break, but Nico in for now.
There you go. Up next, another team that, again, I don't think there's much interest in. Southampton. Updates there, Ben?
Yeah. Look, Ruben Sellas basically said at least 4 to 5 players can expect to be disappointed every week, because that's just the nature of the squad that we've got. Tino Livramento is the only sort of long-term absentee and unavailable for selection. Juan Larios could play for the B team tonight.
There you go. Up next is a team that people should have some interest in because Wolves are very, very bad. Tottenham Hotspur. Kane, I think, is an outside differential for captaincy pick. I think he could do well against a Wolves team that are in the bottom 3 or 4 for XG conceded since the World Cup. What is the latest, though, for Tottenham? And interestingly, got Davies instead of Perisic there on the left.
Yeah, he's had the nod in recent games, and as maybe as unorthodox as it sounds or even looks, they have been getting a tune out of him. So Perisic is out of favour. Of course, he returned for the 5th round tie at Bramall Lane midweek. Those players on the fringes of that starting 11, again, hardly justified any sort of real need for Christian Stellini or Antonio Conte to, didn't really force him into making any tough decisions this weekend. That's why we're pretty much default back to this team. I think the only real discussion point is Kane starts, we know that. And then it's obviously 2 from any 3, with Heung-min Son being the player that has missed out in recent times. He's managing a niggling injury, and that's probably had some bearing on the decision. Richarlison, hasn't been great. And either, in all honesty, either has Kulusevski.
We got a question. Has Davies replaced Perisic permanently?
He certainly has in the short term, but this discussions with regards to Tottenham wing backs go back to August and even in July when we're previewing the season. They're not necessarily players that we want to really be involved in the team, although Davies can obviously drop into that back 3. But there's always going to be, considerations, particularly around European fixtures or congested periods, when the manager's making a lot of changes. So Davies are probably like I say, because he can drop into that back line with Longley, like he has done for most of the season. On the opposite flank, we did think that Porro was going to really come in and give Emerson Royale some competition and be first choice, but what we've seen so far, he makes Emerson Royale look like a world beater. So that position looks to be locked in for him for now.
Yes. It was an interesting discussion we had at the start of the season. That's why, pretty much when we do any analysis, we always say go for the likes of Dyer. He's not as exciting as the wing backs, but he's definitely going to start, and he does have that set piece threat. GV has asked, are Tottenham defence good for a clean sheet? I guess they've done all right recently. Top 9 for XG conceded since the World Cup, but it's Tottenham. They've been inconsistent. In some of the games you'd expect them to win, they don't. And there's a distinct kind of I don't know, worry within the Spurs camp amongst their fans. We talk regularly to the people like Chris Miller from the Extra Inch podcast, and it's kind of, is the Conte style working? We've seen some matches where they look lethargic, and in others, like the game against Chelsea, they were really up for it, and there's no consistency, and for that reason, I probably wouldn't. You get assets like Dyer, you get a little bit more, and you get maybe somebody like Shah from Newcastle who's more assured. We're going to go into the final 2 teams. West Ham. Ings keeping his place. He could be the man to solve West Ham's problems, but do they have any injury problems, Ben?
David Moyes keeping his cards very close to his chest. He mentioned the potential returns of Maxwell Cornet and Kurt Zouma on the training pitches. Of course, given the length of time that they've been out, that would just be into the bench, wouldn't commit. And then he referenced 1 or 2 other injuries that had occurred this week. One of those being Vladimir Coufal. That was a heel injury that forced him off at half-time against Forest, and he was missing for that trip to Old Trafford. That's why we have Ben Johnson in at right back, and also Areola in goal. Lucas Fabianski, we've seen, took a blow to the face. The eye came up fairly instantaneous. Assessments revealed that he had actually fractured the orbital bone or eye socket and also cheekbone. Now, how they're going to proceed with this one, they're not sure. They're seeking guidance, whether he's going to go under the knife and have some kind of surgical procedure, or whether they'll just let the natural healing process, and go down that route. He could, in effect, play with a protective face mask, but I suggest that, with it just being in those initial sort of week, it's still a little bit too soon. That's why we have Areola starting.
Yes, we got a message here from GV. He says, I'm monitoring Benrahma. I think for me, Danny Ings, I might do a little article or video on Danny Ings, but he is just one of the best strikers in the Premier League over the last few seasons. His overperformance on XG is ridiculous. Like, he's such a good finisher, and he could be the one to solve West Ham's problems, because yes, they haven't created a lot of chances. They're probably, mid to the bottom half of the table, but they're not scoring those chances. They have the biggest underperformance on XG Delta, about 9 goals. If Danny Ings just scored those 9 goals, matched their XG, he'd be a very tasty asset. Wolves, a team that I don't think have any tasty assets. I think that they're just not a very good team. What is the latest with them, Ben?
Yeah, a lot of FPL managers were jumping on Hugo Bueno because he was a £3.9 million starter, or certainly close to that starting 11. Unfortunately, he pulled up with a hamstring problem chasing up Mo Salah at Anfield. That's likely to keep him on the sidelines for, potentially up to a month. That's why we have Ait-Nouri on the left-hand side. Kuna, he went off against Fulham. Didn't look great when I think he was stretchered off at the time. Thankfully, it's not as severe as first thought. So he has an outside chance of being involved. And the other place up for grabs, I have Diego Costa over Raul Jimenez. Unfortunately, we're just not seeing, the Raul Jimenez before that horrific head injury that he suffered. Was it 18 months ago, I think now? So, we've got Diego Costa starting there for Wolves.
There you go. That is the latest injury news for everybody. We hope we've answered as many and been informative on your questions as well. But we're going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health, and we will be back for another deadline stream next week. So make sure to be subscribed to the channel. And I do have a captaincy video coming out a little bit later today to help you with your choices. So just stay tuned to the Premier Injuries channel, and we will be back very, very soon. But a goodbye from both of us.